This webinar is being recorded. Let's start the public meeting. Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Altucker. I'm the lead staff for the Ad Hoc Committee on Police Policy Reform. This is meeting number 11 out of now a total of 14. So welcome to the committee members. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful evening. I can see some of you are outside, and that looks like a good place to be. Welcome also to our attendees who are joining us via Zoom and tuning in to this important work. We're complying with Governor Brown's executive order of stay home, save lives, and avoid COVID pandemic, and that's why we're doing it on Zoom. This meeting is being recorded and will be available for viewing on the city website in a day or so. I've got a few opening remarks, and then we will get on with the business at hand this evening. I mentioned this is meeting number 11, and as most of you probably know, the City Council has extended the time for this committee to do their work. They've added 2 extra meetings with the deadline now of April 30th. So we've got tonight, this is number 11. Number 12 will be on March 31st. Number 13 will be on April 7th. And the last meeting, number 14, will be on April 21st. I sent an email out to committee members with those April dates. I hope that you can get those into your calendars. But those are firm dates. They're all from 6 to 8 p.m. and all via Zoom. We are hoping that half of the meeting on April 7th will be half-ish. Some portion of the meeting on April 7th will start looking at the report that Kaz and I are preparing, and we will dedicate the entire meeting on April 21st for you to review, finish your review, and approve the report that will be going to council. A reminder that there is a SurveyMonkey survey available to you, committee members, that we would like you to complete. This is your opportunity to prioritize the remaining topics from Campaign Zero and 21st Century Policing that the committee, because of time, did not have a chance to cover deeply. So I encourage those of you who have not completed the survey to do that. That's helpful information. We will include the results of the survey in the final report. I've included a link to the survey in tonight's information packet. Let's see, what is next? What's next is we have a guest with us tonight, Scott McKee. Nice to see you, Scott.
Thank you.
You might, glad to have you here. We are going to make some time for a question and answer session this evening with Scott. And if you remember, the ad hoc committee approved that to happen. And so we're going to make it happen tonight. Let's see. I think at this point, Kaz, I'm going to ask you to make mention of the written statements that we would like folks to provide.
Thank you very much, Kevin. So we have, so first of all, a reminder to add to Kevin's, 4 members have so far completed the survey. So thank you for those who have. To the others, please do so as soon as possible so we can process the results and make sure they get into the final report. In terms of the report itself, one of the things we're going to be asking for is testimony from the organizations that have come forward to be part of the committee. And then I will engage the mayor's appointees separately in order to work out the best way for them to give feedback. We've had 2 organizations so far who've given long form testimony. And what we're going to be doing is putting that into the appendix and then asking you to give a short form testimony, a summary, which will go into the main body of the report of no more than 250 words. I will send a follow-up email to everyone to outline precisely what we're asking for in the next couple of days. But essentially what we want is to, bearing in mind the purpose of the report is to help the city council to enact these changes, to give us a sense of what your priorities are, So if there's anything that's been passed by the committee that is of particular interest, you can highlight that. If there's anything that we didn't get to that you think is important, again, that would be the ideal forum to do so. Or if there's anything that's fallen completely outside of the scope of 21st century and policing and Campaign Zero that you want to be part of the council's considerations over the longer term, again, this would be the opportunity. So you can choose to give us a long form testimony and a short summary, long form, or simply the short form summary, but it'll be the 250 words that make it into the report. For those of you who served on subcommittees, I've written up a series of short summaries of the discussions that were had, the key areas that were covered, and these will go alongside the motions that were passed, again, to give City Council a sense of what those discussions were. And so again, I'll circulate those for comments. Hopefully I've covered everything, but of course, you always miss something. So we want to make sure that subcommittee members are happy with the characterization that the facilitation team is giving of the way the discussions went. So that's it from me. And as again, I said, the mayor's appointees, I'll contact you separately to work out a way to make sure that your voices are also heard, because of course you're not there with an organization. So that's it from me.
Yes, thanks so much. And I see Silverio has his hand up, and then we're going to toss it over to Mo.
Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to address the signatures on the letter that was sent out, the letter sent from LULAC regarding the process and some of the ad hoc committee complaints that we've received and conversations that we've had. Maisie Davis was listed as transponder, and that was a typo, a mistake. Somebody from Transporter was attempting to sign on, but from what I understand, they're not willing to sign on. But that letter was a letter that came out of several conversations, multiple conversations.
Thank you, Silverio. And with that, Mo, I hand the microphone to you.
Awesome, thank you. One thing that maybe I didn't catch in the intro is that we actually are gonna give Transponder a chance to talk about the recommendations that that y'all sent, and then also LULAC to talk about that letter at the end. So I'm gonna stop our conversation at 7:40, and you'll each get about 10 minutes to kind of provide like a overview and then answer whatever questions we can fit in that time. I'm gonna welcome our guest, Scott McKee. And this is y'all's opportunity to ask Scott any questions about the video that you watched, that he provided for us. And don't all talk at once. Rick?
Yes, Scott, thank you for taking the time to appear before us today. I had a couple of questions about the video. It sounded to me like that you were on internal affairs for a period of time. Is that correct? You're muted.
Yes, that's correct.
It's not the first time that's happened.
I was muted by the host. Yeah, Rick, thank you for having me. Yes, the bulk of I was promoted in 1999 as a sergeant with the Eugene Police Department. And since that time, the bulk of my assigned work has involved internal affairs work. And specifically, I was assigned to internal affairs as my primary position in Eugene after the reorganization and following the Magana and Lara outcomes. So for several years, I worked in that capacity.
How? What years would that have been?
Let's see, probably 2004 through 2007, right around there.
Okay, were you? So your work with internal affairs was before the city audit, or before the police auditor and the civilian review board were put in place.
Yes and no. So I was in that position when the transition occurred. So Chris Bahamud, when she came on board, I was in internal affairs at that time. So she was as you'll recall, the first police auditor for the Eugene Police Department.
Right. During the period of time that Mark Kissinger was the city audit or police auditor, you were not involved in internal affairs.
Not in internal affairs, but I was a special investigator in the Special Investigations Unit, and I was even then assigned internal affairs cases.
Okay.
From time to time.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate
Sure,
it.
you betcha.
Thanks. Do we have any other questions for Scott? I'm going to call on Marty and then Daniel.
So Scott, thanks a lot. What I basically got out of seeing your video was the inherent problem of having a culture within a police department where you're sort of backing each other up, and then having to police that within that culture, and being the bad guy, and having that sort of role, that sort of conflict of interest. My question for you is about when we talk about making it independent, what we're talking about is having a different police department reviewing people from a different department. And here an example, you've moved from one department to another. And I think there's a lot of that. There's a lot of lateral transfer, and there's a lot of times that other departments will work together with each other. So it's not like those are completely divorced, and you still might have some of that conflict even when it's an independent investigation through another organization. So my question for you is specifically about IDFIT and how IDFIT is formed, and doesn't that issue still come up?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would agree with everything you said. I think anytime generally you're asking another outside police agency to conduct an investigation of a police officer in an area agency, there's always going to be a little bit of a tendency, even when you as an investigator resist the influence, there's always going to be some industry influence that I think is a large component of what I would call a problem in policing, internal affairs policing. And that is just generally, I think there's just generally an industry resistance to finding fault in our own industry, if that makes sense. And I think that's, that doesn't just apply for policing, that applies for, the medical profession. I think we see it in other professions as well. It's just difficult internally to investigate your own people. So the second part of your question was more specific to, as I understand it, is there a resolution to that? Is that what you're asking? Sorry.
That is the big question on the table, isn't it? But
Yeah.
I'm just speaking to specifically and more recently the Rodriguez case and the Landeros case, where we see the report come out from the DA, and we see evidence of the ways that the position of the officer is honored and glorified, and the position of the other person, it's just the inequalities there are, for example, drug testing and not drug testing, the officer focusing on criminal records and not including records of complaints that were filed, and so forth.
Sure.
So it seems that is what you're identifying in internal affairs also is an issue in terms of IDFIT and getting that independent investigation as well.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
I would agree. You know, and maybe I can specifically give you an example of a circumstance that I think is probably still a component of IDFIT that I think is a obvious conflict of interest. And that is when you have a police investigator who is assigned to IDFIT, and they do it as an ad hoc sort of assignment. So when there's a, as you know, when there's an officer involved use of deadly force, the IDFIT comes together and it involves agencies, you know, participants from agencies around Lane County in this case. And where I think there can be a conflict is that some of those officers that are IDFIT investigators have also have an assignment that involves representation of the police union. So they can be a board member of the police union and then still get called out as an investigator and even the primary investigator on an IDFIT investigation. And I think we can all intuitively see that there's a conflict of interest, right? If it's a questionable use of force or the circumstances surrounding the entire incident draw into question maybe the officer's decision making, an IDFIT officer who has an obligation to represent an employee and the employee's best interests is placed into a conflict, obviously. And I've had a conversation with a union board member years past when we had this discussion with the Eugene Police Department, in fact, and he told me that whenever there's a conflict of interest, and those are the dynamics at play, his obligation is to benefit the employee. So you can see where that could create a problem, right? And so when he and I talked about that, we weren't really able to, we agreed to disagree because I remember in that instance, he had become involved to the extent that I felt like he had compromised the investigation because of his personal, or I mean, his obligation to represent the employee. So that's a big problem.
All right, it took me 8 years to unmute. I've got Daniel and then Erica and then Betsy.
Thank you, Mo. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Daniel.
Thank you so much for joining us. So I want to build a little on what Marty was talking about, but take it over to the prosecution side.
Sure.
And what I see is a potential conflict of interest that I'm hoping you can address. So it seems to me that there's a relationship between the prosecutors who rely on police officers for testimony in their prosecutions, and that they benefit from the police being credible witnesses in prosecution. When that gets turned around and it's police officers who are being prosecuted, that it seems to me that there's a potential conflict of interest that those prosecutors might not be so willing to present those very same officers who they want to present as being credible, law-abiding, upstanding in prosecutions of civilians, to paint them and prosecute them for crimes that police officers might be committing. Is that a reasonable characterization? And could you talk a little bit about the relationship between prosecutors and law enforcement in that context?
Sure. Generally, prosecutors have an eye, and at least this has been my experience, that prosecutors have an eye for conflict. of interest. And many times if a local, like if the Lane County District Attorney is presented with a case for criminal review that scrutinizes the conduct of a police officer in a criminal way, many times the district attorney will identify a special prosecutor from outside the area to conduct the review or investigation. And so in principle, that is a very astute way of trying to eliminate bias in review. But in practice, it seems that there's still, that can sometimes still be problematic. And I was involved in a specific case where I felt like that was a component. And you obviously can't eliminate the dynamic that a district attorney is an elected official, and they do rely, district attorney candidates or the district attorney does rely in some aspect on the support of the police union, right? Because the public looks upon, well, if the police union supports this district attorney candidate, then that influences, I think, the population as to the veracity of the district attorney. So I mean, I guess if I'm answering your question, if I understand your question correctly, I think that in principle, district attorneys look out for that and attempt to recuse themselves from that kind of a review, and rely on other agencies or other jurisdictions to conduct those reviews. But there is still, I think they can still be problematic, because in passing the ball off from one district attorney to another, there's going to be a discussion about the case that I'm presenting. And not that there's influence that is corrupted, I'm not saying that, but I think that there can still be, that there's a lack of transparency in some regard. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
Sure, and again, I'm basing that on some experiences, and I could go into more detail about it, but I think I have a pretty public record of opposing police misconduct, cover up and corruption, even all the way up to, my boss, the chief of police. And those are integrity-based oppositions. And I feel like, and this is my assessment of myself, that because of the path that I've traveled in my career, even though I'm a 35-year police officer, and you would think I would be someone who would just, blindly support the police. I have been exposed to corruption at a level that has caused me to become awake, for lack of a better term, to the possibility that our systems are flawed that way.
All right, friends. I just got kicked out of Zoom, but I'm here by phone for now. I'm gonna call on Erica and Betsy. I'm hoping that no one else has raised their hands, because we're coming up against our 20-minute time that we had allotted for Scott. And so Erica and then Betsy.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott, for being here. I have many questions, but I'm going to try to make two, hopefully in the same. Okay, so, it seems to me that within this, the way it is approached, the cases specifically after some people had been murdered or had been, brutalized by police, can you explain why some information is excluded and some other information is amplified? For example, can you explain why the IDFIT summary report presented to the public by DA Patty Perlow would include all kinds of information, from Mr. Rodriguez. Like Mr. Rodriguez might have had some drugs in his system, some information like so Mr. Rodriguez had a difficulty or an, you know, and a not positive reaction at DHS. However, information like whether Samuel Tykel, who murdered Eliborio, we never heard whether this person was drug tested. We don't know that this person had drugs in the system, right? Also, they never mentioned that Mr. Rodriguez have had filed a lawsuit for excessive force claims against UO Police Department. So can you explain why some information, and the same, you know, in Charlie Landeros case, some information like were not delivered, like for example, why there was no account of why the cop shot Charlie directly in the head, a shot sure to kill rather than incapacitate. Also, can you explain why the ADFIT summary report of Eliborio Rodriguez never mentioned that Cop Tykel was asking to see Eliborio like this, and then he grabbed Eliborio, and then he pushed it to the ground? In case of Charlie Landeros, Charlie was pushed to the wall, even though Charlie was already complying. So why this information was not delivered in any of the reports? Is there a specific reason why some information is hidden that seems very important to me, and some others are amplified, like things that have happened in the past? Is there a specific strategy that this is used for? Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Those are all very good questions and troubling. The theme is troubling, I think, and I can tell by the way you're talking that this is an emotional topic for you, and well, it should be. I think you know, there are in many cases, especially I think at the beginning of the meeting. One of the comments, one of the observations was that as a comparable example, some of the internal affairs related conduct of the officer is omitted from public disclosure. And I think in a lot of cases, that's because of public records laws. And since I don't have any direct experience with those cases, I can't speak to those cases specifically. But I think what I hear you saying, and what I would acknowledge, is that editorializing a incident in that manner has a way of influencing negatively public perception about the individual. And whether or not that's deliberate or not, it is still an issue. I had a field training officer many years ago tell me that just make the observation that the dead can't speak for themselves. And I think that's true, and that's a troubling circumstance when somebody is killed as a result of police use of force. I think the public expects that we hear everything about the incident, to include both sides, in a transparent way. And the trouble is that when a prosecutor is identifying or assessing the case for the validity of the use of force, I think editorializing sometimes happens in order to, in some ways, and sometimes influence the perception of the incident. And so that's a troubling aspect. And I think that's something that I'm glad that your committee is evaluating and assessing and addressing. I don't have answers. unfortunately, to those questions. But I think that those are questions that this committee needs to push forward in order to create a level playing field for everybody. Many times it seems that the district attorney will quite correctly evaluate the specific circumstances around the use of force in order to determine whether or not the use of force is justified. But what is eliminated from the evaluation in most of those cases is the tactics that led up to the incident. And I think that is where I think the public needs to really focus their energy. Not whether or not it's an incident, a use of force is justified, but is it reasonable and is it necessary? And I think if you evaluate an incident from a higher altitude, you get to look at, and rightly so, you look at whether or not the police, the tactics that they used at the onset were designed to save a life, to rescue somebody in crisis, or was their response to isolate a suspect and a threat and eliminate that threat? Those are two broad categories, but I think you really have to, it's a response mentality that can really influence the outcome. And so I know I give long answers, but I think if the police in every situation responded to the circumstances, whatever they are, and with the mindset that this person is a member of my family, that I think the outcomes would be different. So I'm sorry I can't, address all the questions that you have, Erica. They're very legitimate questions that need to be answered. But I think, my general assessment is that that sometimes there's influence, obviously, at that level. But at the level of the prosecutor, where the details about the suspect are, publicly aired, and we don't get to hear maybe a lot of details that I think are important to us.
So can we agree that is a dehumanizing strategy to justify a decision, and that obviously is not part of the job they have to be doing? The police job is not to kill people, right?
That's correct. I mean, that the hope is obviously in every situation that we can peacefully end circumstances where there's crisis. And again, I think if the response mentality is that we want to rescue this person, that we want to treat them like our family and give them the space that we might give a family member in crisis, I think the outcomes would be different in a lot of cases.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to call on Betsy, and Sandra, I see your hand up, but we are going to be out of time after Betsy. So I'm really sorry. Betsy, now's your time.
Hear me?
I can hear you
Yes.
now.
Oh, I'm having microphone and, as you can tell, video. Hi, Scott.
Hi.
Back to the original example of sort of conflict of interest that you raised in terms of the ad hoc assignment to investigative teams of use of force. Did you hear me, Scott?
Yes, I can. I'm kind of leaning in, sorry.
Well, I see that, and I do so apologize. The conflict of interest on ad hoc membership of an investigative team also being, having an ad hoc assignment to the police union. That example, how are those ad hoc assignments made? Are there procedures, rules? Is it within a policy or anything in terms of the constitution of investigative teams?
I think, well, generally, I think those assignments are, for lack of a better term, merit-based. So based on the performance of the investigator, you know, I think they are selected in that manner. Chief Kearns, former Chief Kearns and I had this discussion many years ago about our concern about that conflict of interest. I'm not sure where that went. I think I'm not sure that the district attorney, you know, I mean, I'm giving my opinions. Maybe the district attorney views that concern differently, but I think it's a valid concern. And so I don't really know the answer to that question, other than I think it is something that needs to be addressed. It's a clearly identifiable conflict of interest that could be resolved with discussion. And so I think it's worthy of moving forward in some manner. I think the district attorney would certainly not disagree that that can create a conflict of interest. And if given that scenario, I think the district attorney would probably recognize that that does create a conflict.
So do you think it would be, oh, is the district attorney, I thought someone was trying to talk. So in the use of force recommendations for change, do you think that's something, and maybe this is the district attorney as well, that we could put something in that policy that speaks to the constitution of investigative teams and put a recommendation that they not also be an ad hoc assignment to the police union to eliminate conflict of interest?
Yeah, certainly. And I think, you know, along those lines, you could potentially propose other potential conflicts that might exist. You know, lawyers recuse themselves from cases where they have a conflict that that might not otherwise. I mean, that's something that is incumbent upon the district attorney or the deputy district attorney or the lawyer to evaluate themselves and recuse themselves from. So that same process might be something that could be proposed, that for instance, if an officer has had a prior domestic relationship or friendship, to the extent that it might contaminate their ability to be able to evaluate things from a non-bias level, that officers should be given the affirmative direction to recuse themselves from those investigations.
Would you be so kind as to provide some, because you're very articulate, but can't keep track of everything that you've covered in terms of conflict of interest, because we know there are many, and
Sure.
that's what keeps these things happening. Could you provide us with some kind of summary of where you see conflicts of interest that are problematic, where we could then take them and quickly look at those relative to policies and recommendations?
Yeah, sure, you bet.
And
Be happy to.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. What else? Use of force people subcommittee. I don't know how to refer the gang of use of force. Was there anything in the policies that you looked at, if you saw any police policies, or in the Campaign Zero and 21st Century Policing, that dealt with the constitution of the investigative team on use of force?
Sorry to jump in on this one, Betsy, but I think that that's actually something that's covered under the Independent Investigation and Oversight section.
Oh,
and that committee is has got one more meeting to go. I may be wrong, but I seem to recall that there were several bits relating to the responsibilities of those teams, how they should be constituted, and who they should be responsible to.
Why, thank you. Then it would behoove that maybe to look at that to see if something could be integrated to keep ad hoc assigned police union members from being on the ad hoc assignment to an investigative team. So thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott, for being here and answering all sorts of questions. You are free to go enjoy the sun, or you can stay and listen. But we super appreciate your time.
Sure. Thank you. Sorry, I'm kind of long-winded. COVID's been difficult on Scott McKee because it's really difficult to keep anybody away from me more than 6 feet. So I'm a talker. Anyway, thank you. I really appreciate the work and dedication of your group. I think you are touching on really good issues that are 21st century policing activities that really will help the community and the police department stay together in the future. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. We are going to move to what was agenda item number 2. We're going to consider recommendations and motions from the subcommittees. I actually wanted to share with you all that after the meeting at the end of March, I'm not going to be facilitating anymore. I had committed to doing this through the end of January, and it is the end of March, and I really am enjoying you all, and I am running out of steam. So I've got 2 more meetings with you. So the first motion that we will be talking about is body worn cameras 103. And that motion says, motion regarding video footage and public record. Recommend that the city of Eugene press the state legislature and legislators to make all body cam and dash cam video public record. So I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Was that Silver?
I'll second.
It
I'll
was.
second. Oh, someone seconded. Okay.
Yeah, who seconded before Brian?
Ems?
M's.
Perfect, thank you. Any discussion? All right, I don't see any hands, so we're just gonna go ahead and vote on this. I will start at the top. Ems,
Yes.
Daniel,
Yes.
Betsy,
Yes.
Macy,
Yes.
Ibrahim Koulibaly,
Yes.
Leah,
Yes.
Abdul Rahman,
Yes.
Lindsay,
Yes.
Ebe,
Yes.
Rick Hamilton,
Yes.
Erica,
Yes.
Brian,
Is that me? Yes.
yes. Silver,
Yes.
Tana,
Yes.
Guadalupe,
Yes.
Rick Rosetta,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Leticia,
Yes.
Sandra,
Yes.
Patricia,
Yes, thank you.
and Marty.
Was that me?
Yes.
Yes.
Mo, the count on that is 21 yes, 0 no.
All right, the motion passes. So the next one that we're going to talk about is body worn camera number 104. And that motion reads, motion regarding viewing of video footage. Incidents involving use of force or police brutality. Officers should be prevented from reviewing footage of an incident before completing initial reports, statements, or interviews about an incident. If the city wants the officers to have the ability to view the video footage, suspects that suffer police brutality or use of force should also have access to the footage before they complete their report. I will entertain a motion.
I move that motion.
I
Thank you.
second it.
Thank you.
Who was second?
Daniel?
Thank you.
And M's sent a request to have the motions up on screen. So I'm going to attempt to make that share unless anyone has any strong objections to that plan.
Thank you, Kez.
Awesome. Any discussion on this one? Oh my gosh.
Mo, I see
gonna-
Rick Rosetta.
Okay, Rick Rosetta. I can only see 5 of you at a time now, so
Thank,
holler
thank,
if you have your hand up.
thank you. I just had one
Okay.
question. Why is this being requested? And it's a little confusing about, in other words, aren't we better off if the reports are accurate and based on what happened rather than trying to make it appear that we're trying to trick the officer into writing something that he can get criticized for later? The camera is the camera, it strikes me, but I may be wrong about that. I just was curious if someone on that committee would explain why that's being proposed.
Who was on that committee?
I'll answer that.
Thank you.
So we specific put here in situations of excessive force, and because we understand that when it comes to robberies and other police activity, it does come in handy, since we are talking about writing a very precise report. Our concern when it comes to police brutality is that officers might see might see little body language or little movements of a person and then use that as an excuse to that's why they reacted to it. Especially because right now the folks are not allowed to review those cameras and write their own report based on that footage. So that's why we put if the police in the city still want the officers to have the ability to do that, that's fine. But we also, in order to get some fairness, I guess, let's have the people who are also doing these complaints and reports to also view the footage before they actually make the report, to have a precise report. Because let's say someone, I am a victim of police brutality and I try to make a report and I might have missed something, or I might have misspoke, and then that's already in the report and I cannot change it. And if I review the footage, then I'm able to actually make my report more accurate, just like a police officer.
Thank you.
Mo, I don't know
Thank
if you
you.
can see the queue of hands, but I see Marty and then I see Leah.
Okay, Marty and then Leah. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the response to Rick's question that just to remind us all that when we were speaking with Patty Perlow and we put the question to Patty Perlow, why don't we show the civilians involved the body cam footage? She laughed and said that would be ludicrous because if we were to show them that video, how could we ever know whether their testimony was their testimony or whether it was influenced by the video? And I fail to understand if that is a problem, why it isn't a problem for the police officer involved as well. So it seems to me a clear example of what we were talking about with Scott McKee, where the police officer gets an unfair advantage.
Thanks, Marty. Leah?
So I just had a quick question, just because of the way this is worded. It just brought up the question to me, is the sense of the subgroup that it would be better for neither the officer nor the person involved in the complaint to be able to review it? Or is the intent to say everybody should be able to review the video before they make the complaint? Does that make sense?
I could speak for my opinion, and in my opinion, I did not. I don't think as a group, we came to one side or the other. Our concern was more about that police officers having that advantage. And an example that I think was given was a person gets stopped and they move their hand a certain way, but the other officer may have not seen at the moment, but now they have reviewed the camera, and even though it could have been just a bad officer being racist or any other excuse, now they see like, oh, I saw the hand really close to their pocket, so I decide to tase them, or I decide to beat them. So that's our concern. I don't think we have one or the other, since we're trying to make the process fair. And since there has been so many, there has been so many walls about trying to take that away from officers reviewing the camera, then we decided then if the officers could view the camera, then the folks filing those reports should view the camera footage too.
Okay, thank you. That helps. I wasn't, I'm hearing that the intent is just to be sure the process is fair to both sides, and that whatever way it goes, that everybody gets the same advantage. All right, thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. Do we have any other discussion, or are we ready to vote? All right, I think we're ready. So I'm going to start at the bottom. Marty?
Yes.
Patricia?
Yes.
Sandra?
Yes.
Leticia?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Rick Rosetta?
No.
Quentin?
Yes.
Guadalupe?
I'm sorry. Yes.
Thank you. Tana?
Yes.
Silver?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Erica?
Yes.
Rick Hamilton?
I'm sorry, I lost track of the question. I don't mean to be a pain, but could you reiterate the question really quick? Because I know the concerns with the camera, but okay. Should be prevented from reviewing. For various reasons, I have to abstain.
Okay.
That's a no-win situation for either the public or the officer on that one. And it's hard to explain in a short period of time. And that's why I abstain on that one.
Okay, thank you. Ebe,
Yes, please.
Lindsay,
Yes.
Abdul Rahman,
Yes.
Leah,
Yes.
Ibrahim,
Yes.
Macy,
Yes.
Betsy,
Yes.
Daniel,
Yes.
and Ems.
Yes.
Mo, the count on that is 20 yes, 1 no, 1 abstention.
All right, thanks, friends. The motion carries. Next, we have body worn camera subcommittee motion 105. It's on your screen, but I'm going to read it just for funsies. The motion regarding discipline. It includes a disciplinary matrix clearly defining consequences for officers who fail to adhere to the agency's body camera policy.
So moved.
I would enter. Thank you, Silver.
Second.
A second.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Any discussion? Leah, I see that your hand is up, but I think it's just still residually up from before. Is that right?
Question.
Okay,
So,
go ahead.
my question, I just wondered if somebody could define a disciplinary matrix.
So we currently do not have a disciplinary matrix at the EPD, and this was something that was, I believe, filtered through the chief or his proxy at the meeting, and establishing something that would allow for us to have some sort of a step process or some sort of a process to allow for us to see when officers are not using body cameras in a proper way. If that continues to happen, that there be some sort of I don't want to use the incorrect term here, but that they're not able to do so continuously.
Thanks.
M?
And I was just gonna add that we left that open because the other subcommittee was gonna work on this too. And since we were only working on body cameras, we just wanted to make it clear that body cameras, if they don't conform to that, they will go through that disciplinary action or that matrix.
Thank you. Daniel?
Yeah, the disciplinary matrix is an idea that came out of the community oversight subcommittee. The idea being that since disciplinary actions are human resource actions, that those are protected information to protect the private employee file of the employee, that to increase the transparency of disciplinary actions with respect to the community, so that they can know that justice has been served. The idea of the disciplinary matrix is that for any given policy violation, there's a range of disciplinary actions from which the police chief could choose, but there's at least a minimum disciplinary action and a maximum disciplinary action for any given policy violation. And I also see that there's a motion 107 brought forth by Lindsay to that effect as well.
Thank you. Brian?
have a question about the role of the police chief or any other police department personnel in 105 and perhaps later in 107. But the reason I bring it in 105 is to ask, it seems that as it's written, it could be an ultimate discretionary decision by the police chief or a member of the police personnel. And if that's not your intention, then perhaps we can amend it to say it will not be at the discretion of the police chief or other Eugene Police Department personnel. If you're okay with that language, then I'm okay with it. It's more a recommendation to you if you want to amend it so that it clearly states that. Right now, it's sort of ambiguous on that point.
I don't want to get into wordsmithing. I think that the intent was that there is no clearly defined matrix for disciplinary actions for those who continually have issues with their body worn cameras. And we just like to establish something as such. There hasn't been any policy with this in regards to body worn cameras.
Any other discussion? All right, we'll take it to a vote. We're going to start at the top. Ems,
Yes.
Daniel,
Yes.
Betsy,
Yes.
Macy,
Yes.
Ibrahim,
Yes.
Leah,
Yes.
Abdulrahman,
Yes.
Lindsay,
Did you call me, Mo?
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. The internet connection is so bad tonight. I apologize. Yes.
Thank you. Ebe,
Yes.
Rick Hamilton, Rick Hamilton,
It looks like he
Oh,
stepped
he's-
away from his camera.
you see that? Erica,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Silver,
Yes.
Tana,
Yes.
Guadalupe,
Yes.
Quentin,
Yes.
here. Okay. Rick Rosetta,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Leticia,
Yes. Yes.
thank you. Sandra,
Yes.
Patricia,
Yes.
and Marty.
Yes.
Mo, that's 21 yes, 0 no.
The motion carries. Thank you.
Rick is joining
next-
us again. Sorry.
I'm looking at his camera and it
Yeah,
looks
he just
like a very
came into
empty.
frame. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Um,
He came into frame and then he left, so it's fine.
Oh, okay, thank you. So the next one we're gonna talk about is, BWC 106. And it is a motion regarding muting of body worn cameras. Muting microphones should be prohibited and audio will be redacted or edited if needed at the stored facility. Officers who mute microphones will get appropriate training or disciplinary action according to the disciplinary matrix. I would entertain a motion.
Motion.
Second.
Who made the motion?
Ems.
Thank you. And Ibrahim seconded it.
I did.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion?
My only comment will be that oh my God, I forgot her name, but Officer Angela, maybe.
Angie San Miguel.
There you go. She was actually like this motion because they're even currently having problems just trying to train the officers because they're muting constantly. So when they're trying to train them, they don't know what's going on. So therefore, they cannot even train them properly. So they're even we even got an okay from the police.
Okay, thank you. It looks like we're ready to vote. I'm gonna start at the bottom with Marty.
Yes.
Patricia,
Yes.
Sandra, sorry, I'm like scrolling a bunch. Sandra,
Yes.
thank you. Leticia,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Rick Rosetta,
Yes.
Quentin,
Yes.
Guadalupe,
Yes.
Tana,
Yes.
Silver,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Erica,
Yes.
Rick Hamilton,
Yes.
Ebe,
Yes.
Lindsay,
Yes.
Abdul Rahman,
Yes.
Leah,
Yes.
Ibrahim,
Yes.
Macy,
Yes.
Betsy,
Yes.
Daniel,
Yes.
and Ems.
Yes.
That's 22 yes, 0 no.
The motion carries. Next, we are going to look at AHCPP 107. I don't know what that stands for, but we're going to talk about it. The motion is regarding officer evaluation metrics, and it reads, move that EPD create metrics of success for officers based on community values such as de-escalation, and then proactively evaluate officers based on those metrics during documented annual or more frequent performance reviews. These reviews should be conducted for all officers of every rank and tenure. Additional reviews should be conducted based on complaints, but these should not replace the routine review. Those who train new officers should act as field training or act as field training officers should have a demonstrated record of positive performance reviews. Supervisors should be evaluated on their timely and thorough completion of these reviews, and EPD should present a public annual report of compliance rate for timely reviews and thematic analysis of strengths and weaknesses of the department according to the metrics. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? I don't see any hands. So we are going to,
Mo,
Yeah.
just to pause here. This motion was brought forward by Lindsay Foltz. She may want to speak to it.
I'm happy to answer any questions that people have, but we have had bits of conversation. I guess it was several months ago that pertained to this, and everybody was there for some of those conversations. So I'm happy to answer any questions or modify language if anybody has suggestions.
Daniel?
Yeah, Lindsay, your motion reads that EPD create the metrics. Is there some language that could put in that would community, that the community would have input in what those metrics are?
Yeah, that's a great
To
point.
ensure that those metrics are aligned with our community standards and values.
I like that. I think you're right. It should be more strongly worded. I should have said something like based on community values and direct community input. Would that modify it enough or strengthen enough, or would you like to say that differently?
I think that works. There might be a stronger way to say it, but I mean, I think that at least gets the idea in there.
Thank you for noticing that.
Marty's suggesting that it say implement instead of create.
So that move that EPD implement metrics of success. That's fine.
Yeah.
With me.
Okay. Brian?
Following
go
up
ahead,
on
Lindsay.
Go ahead, whoever was talking. Okay.
Lindsay, do you want to finish your thought?
No, I was just going to say, I don't know where we're going to get with Robert's rules issues now that there's a motion and a second and whatever, but I'm sure we can all, as friends, work that out eventually.
Yeah. Brian?
Yeah, first, I want to say that I entirely agree with Lindsay's just past statement. I think that's how we should be working together throughout. What I would try to emphasize in terms of Daniel's input, it's not a matrix of success for officers with community, with direct community approval rather than input.
I like that. That sounds stronger to me and closer to what I had imagined.
As a heads up, that's what I'm going to be saying on 109 as well.
All right, is there more discussion?
I have a question. Brian, could you say that again? I want to make sure I capture that.
Sure, but somebody wrote it in. Was that you, Kevin?
Yeah, I think I've got it in the on the screen share, Kevin.
Well, you are on top of it, way ahead of me. Thank you, Kaz.
Okay, I'm going to ask Brian and Patricia. Oh, Daniel, did you want to?
Yeah, just if that could say with direct community input and approval.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good because then it would be input on the front end and then approval of the overall metrics at the end. So that would be multiple points of community collaboration. That seems like a great idea.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to ask Brian and Patricia if you accept these amendments.
Yes, I do.
Or many.
Patricia.
Yes, I do.
All right. Then we're going to vote. Starting at the top this time, Ems,
Yes.
Daniel,
Yes.
Betsy,
Yes.
Macy,
Yes.
Ibrahim,
Yes.
Leah,
Yes.
Abdulrahman,
Yes.
Lindsay,
Yes.
Ebe,
Yes.
Rick Hamilton, I should be checking his screen. Where did he go? All right, Erica,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Silver,
Yes.
Anna,
Yes.
Guadalupe,
Yes.
Quentin, Quentin, all right. Rick Rosetta,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Leticia,
Yes.
Sandra,
Yes.
Patricia,
Yes.
and Marty.
Yes.
The count on that is 20 yes, 0 no.
The motion carries. All right, next we are going to talk about AHCPP 108. And that motion reads, motion to create a disciplinary matrix. Move that the City of Eugene establish and bargain for a disciplinary matrix for EPB that determines the range of disciplinary action for sustained misconduct or policy violation. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
So moved, seconded.
Okay, I missed
Who made
who
that motion?
moved. Yeah,
I did.
David,
Yes.
thank you.
thank you.
And Brian seconded it.
Got it, thank you.
Yeah. Do we have any discussion? I see there's one hand up. Brian?
A couple of things following up on the previous motion. It seems like you're wanting, as you did in the previous motion, to have community input and community approval for the matrix. Would that be accurate?
I hadn't put that in there, but I think that that's a good idea if you would like to add it.
Yes, I would.
That seems sensible and the language is already hammered out, so thanks for cutting and pasting, Kaz.
And the other thing, I don't know why, and maybe you have good reason, you put the word sustained in there rather than just misconduct.
Oh, yeah, I suppose that might be like unnecessary. People don't get disciplined for allegations that are unfounded or with insufficient evidence. I think I just put sustained misconduct because that's the language we use at the CRB table. So I think that's the only reason it's in there. I suppose it's sort of maybe stating the same thing twice, but
It could be read as, frequent or continual misconduct. It's a word that could be read different ways.
yeah, good point. Let me think for just a second. I don't think contemporaneously very well. Let me think if I can come up with a slight modification to make that more clear. Hold on for just a second.
Would proven misconduct work?
I think so. I see what you mean. Like, I think proven can work, Eve. That seems to make sense. I think people will not be able to mistake that meaning.
Yes, I think that's pretty easy to, unambiguous, as they say.
Thank you. My mind doesn't work that fast.
Any other discussion? David, how do you feel about those additions?
Yeah, that sounds, I'm in favor of them, no problem at all.
Sweet. We are gonna vote. I will start at the bottom with Marty.
Yes.
Patricia?
Yes.
Sandra? Sandra? Oh, I might have lost her. Leticia?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Rick Rosetta?
Yes.
Quentin? I think we lost him too. Guadalupe?
Yes.
Tana?
Yes.
Silver?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Erica?
Yes.
Rick Hamilton? Might be gone. Yeah. Ebe?
Yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
Abdulrahman?
Yes.
Leah?
Yes.
Ibrahim?
Yes.
Macy?
Yes.
Betsy?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
And M.
Did you
M?
I don't think he was there. Oh, there he is.
Okay.
There we go. And Sandra? See your name again.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
So I think I heard that M's voted yes, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry.
No
So
worries.
that vote count is 20 yes, 0 no.
All right, I think we have time for one more, friends. A motion to give Civilian Review Board adjudication authority. So this motion reads, move that the City of Eugene endow the civilian police auditor and the Civilian Review Board with the authority to override the police chief's adjudication in response to investigations of misconduct or policy violations. In cases when the police auditor and the chief do not agree on the adjudication, the Civilian Review Board will review the case and vote on whether they concur with the auditor's adjudication. If the CRB votes to concur with the auditor's adjudication, then the auditor's adjudication is final. I see Brian has a hand up already.
Second.
Go ahead, Brian.
What's that? Oh,
I think Patricia has something to say after you. So Brian and then Patricia.
I agree with each word before the colon, which is to say, motion to give Civilian Review Board adjudicative authority. The rest remains problematic. I identify the same problem as you do. And I just see it not solved here. There's always going to be an internal affairs investigation. I think what maybe we could do is say motion to give the Civilian Review Board independent adjudication authority. I don't think we need 2 or 3 different investigations going on. The Civilian Review Board should do its investigation. The Internal Affairs Department should do its investigation. And that way we'll have what the police say and we'll have what the community says. I don't know if that's of any interest to you or not. There's other motions that will come and have come that identify that language. And this is your motion, so you can put it as ever you want, and I would, not disagree. But that's my suggestion. That motion gives Civilian Review Board independent adjudication or final adjudication authority. I would say independent because they should do their own investigation. That's all.
Lindsay, is your hand up in response to what Brian said?
Yes, but I don't want to go out of order. So that's why I put my hand up.
Okay, so I'm gonna call on Patricia and then Lindsay.
Thank you. Well, my question was regarding if that it would be independent adjudication authority will be problematic as really making it possible. What I'm saying is, isn't it really supposed to be independent already if it's a community? I'm just don't understand what is exactly the independent will bring in this case.
So Patricia, let me explain one thing and then see if you have other follow-up questions.
Yes.
So the way that the process works, so I sit on the Civilian Review Board. The way that the process works now is the Civilian Review Board has access to all the investigative materials. The police auditor, and we basically see the job that the police auditor does and then the investigations that Internal Affairs conducts. We, in our meetings, make statements about whether we agree with the chief of police's adjudication or the police auditor's adjudication, or both. Oftentimes they're the same, but sometimes, and in some critical cases that I've personally witnessed, they're not the same. And the auditor's findings and the CRB feel very differently than the chief does about the same case. But the way that the process works now is the chief is the ultimate final adjudication, regardless of what anyone else says. And that's the problem that I want to solve. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but I don't see how we're gonna solve it with this one. The authority to override the police chief's adjudication. Is that where is the emphasis on?
Yes. So that in cases where the chief finds that someone, that the auditor, the civilian auditor's adjudication is different than the police chief's, that the auditor's adjudication would stand with support from the CRB, so that there would be a mechanism for community to override the findings of the police chief, which we currently don't have. And the reason that matters is, of course, if somebody is not found to have a sustained allegation of misconduct, if the chief says not sustained or within policy, then nothing happens to that officer, right? They're found basically not guilty. What I'm trying to do is figure out a way to fix a problem that Rick has brought up, which is it's not a good balance of power to have investigation and adjudication in the same branch. And right now the police have investigation and adjudication. I'm asking for more balance by asking for there to be a civilian override process for adjudications where the civilians disagree with the police chief.
Okay. So is it well written in here as it shows what you're saying?
It's clear to me, but that doesn't mean that it's clear to you. And if there's something that, and also I don't expect everybody to necessarily agree with what I'm saying. So I think that
I do agree.
there are some differences between what I'm recommending here and some things, for example, that I think that Brian has brought up in the past. So the main difference is in my motion, I'm not asking for the Civilian Review Board to do their own private investigation. I am asking for them to use the investigative materials that are provided and overseen by the auditor's office. So that process, part of the process wouldn't change, but then we would just have the power to override the police chief's adjudication. So I will say that's one difference. And I think there's a lot of room for a variety of opinions about what the better path is.
Thank you. And I agree with you to leave it like this.
If I can just jump in very briefly, I just want to remind members as well that we're going to be putting forward whatever recommendations come. So it's not going to be the question of we're going to have one motion on the Civilian Review Board. The facilitation team is committed to put everything forward. So if you supported a previous motion that's different, there's also no reason why you couldn't support this one as well.
Thank you. Do we have any other discussion?
Can I just get a clarification on what Kaz just said? I'm not sure. I'm sorry.
Okay, so for example, I think Brian and Daniel have worked on something which has a slightly different take, which Lindsay was just referring to. You're not being asked to choose between different versions of Civilian Review Board power or oversight. You can, if you support the other motion, you can also support this one. Both of them would then go into the report, and both of them would be before the City Council as potential recommendations for them to take up.
Thank you. I see Brian has his hand up.
I just wanted to respond to the idea that the investigator and the adjudicator have to be different. The example given when that was raised was a trial. And, you know, would it be fair for a prosecutor to then make the decision at trial? And that's because there are two opposing parties and an independent fact finder. This is just an investigation. And it's perfectly legitimate to make a motion to say that the Civilian Review Board be the investigator and the adjudicator. It's nothing like a trial where you have a prosecutor, a defendant, a judge, and a jury. The investigators have their job to investigate, and just like the IA makes its decision, the Civilian Review Board should make its decision. The difference is that the civilians doing investigations is, I think, paramount to holding police accountable in some fashion. And that's why I think they should be independent. That's all.
Thank you. Lindsay?
I think that's an absolutely valid position. I personally don't agree, and that's fine. I think for me, the police auditor is a civilian. So for me, I'm personally comfortable with the civilian oversight of the internal affairs investigation. I have never seen an internal, so I get to see these investigations, and this is just my own perspective, which is limited. The investigations aren't what give me greatest concern. It's the adjudications and the discipline that I have really massive issues with. And so that's why in my motions, you'll see me speaking to those things and not the investigation side. But I absolutely acknowledge that there are many other legitimate perspectives on the investigative side. That's just not one that I personally hold. So I thought, I'm just kind of contributing another variation here.
I see that Daniel has his hand up. I also see that Marty is calling for a vote. I'll let Daniel speak and then we'll vote. How about that?
Thank you. Yeah, just quickly, I think there are a lot of ways that this could be implemented. I would also could envision the possibility of the CRB overriding the adjudication of both the auditor and the police chief, even if they agree. But ultimately, to me, the important point is that a civilian body have the final power of adjudication. And that's the essence of this motion, even if we disagree of the finer points of how it's implemented.
Thank you. Brian, I see your hand up, but we have a call for a vote. So we're going to vote and we'll see where that takes us.
So motion.
Yeah. The motion is for the look at how I can't even talk. For the motion on the table. It's for the motion that's on the screen. Did I hear you say yes?
Yeah, motion.
Thank you. Daniel?
Yes.
Betsy?
Yes.
Macy?
Yes.
Ibrahim?
Yes.
Leah?
Yes.
Abdulrahman?
Yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
Ebe?
Yes.
Erica?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Silver?
Yes.
Tana?
Yes.
Guadalupe?
Yes.
Quentin? Quentin is gone. Rick Rosetta?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Leticia?
Yes.
Sandra?
Yes.
Patricia?
Yes.
And Marty?
Yes.
Sorry, Mo, the count is 20 yes, 0 no.
All right, the motion carries. We made it through almost all of them. Thank you, friends. We'll address this last one at the next meeting. I want to make sure we have time for Transponder to talk about their recommendations and for the LULAC folks and the others who signed that letter to talk about that. So we'll start with Transponder.
Hi, folks. There was some conversation in one of our meetings about dissatisfaction with some of the process and the lack of our ability to share our voices, to come to the table from the communities that we represent. And so in looking at that, I went back to Transponder and said, what is our voice? What is it that we want to bring to the city council in response to this request on the ad hoc committee? And if we could just package that from our own perspective, what would that look like? And the attachment that you received along with the model police policy that was created by a national organization was the outcome of that effort. And at the time that I talked to the facilitation team about, is this something we can do? I had asked that be something that each organization be invited to do. That each organization could speak from your perspective and from your voice and say, what are the policing issues that you face and what are the proposals that you would bring to city council? So I just wanted to frame that, and because it just got attached and it was, not like the proposals that we have, and it probably seemed a little odd to people who didn't know why that was out there. And I also would love to hear from other people on this committee what you would bring to the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the transponder attachment?
I have a question. Comment.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Maddie, for sharing this. I think it's the right thing to do to go back to your organization and have a conversation about what to bring to the table. And we have been doing that before the ad hoc committee, during the ad hoc committee, and we will continue to do that because we here as NAACP representative, but we represent a larger community of our members. So it's very important that coming here, people come with whatever concern the community have, but also they report back to that community, that community, that organization, to get feedback. So I really appreciate what you have done, and I'm glad to continue even after the ad hoc committee conversation around community policy with you.
Thank you. I don't see any more hands up, so I'm gonna ask the folks who, I don't know if LULAC wants to kick it off or everybody, if you want to talk about the letter that you sent.
So I will step into this conversation. I will say that there have been a number of conversations that I've had with former ad hoc committee members, current ad hoc committee members, and just people who are involved in the process as a whole. And we wanted to go on public record with the information that we provided in the letter, stating that we've had issues with some of the processes and the work that's been done. That's detailed in the letter. We spent several meetings just working on the process. We spent several meetings dealing with specifically the use, not with the community oversight work, but a lot of the other subcommittees' work has not been made made it to the table. We have had a real good discussion about a number of the other subcommittees' work, and so that was an issue that was detailed in the letter. And there's been some simple informational data that's been asked to be shared to us as members, and even that wasn't shared. So we wanted to get it on record that we've had and have had several conversations, not just with ad hoc committee members, but people who are involved with the process, and people who are seeing this as another opportunity for the city to do a window dressing. And I'm gonna take a step back from my just saying that this is why we presented this letter and say, I have lost friends over the killing of George Floyd, because there's some people who are still seeing it as a man who was a criminal who was overdosed on fentanyl. And anybody who's seen that video can say to see the look in Derek Chauvin's eyes that it was a deliberate killing. And this is the work that we're here for. We're here because police brutality has to stop. And we want to see our community be a leader in across the nation in the work that the community does with the police commission or with the police department. Me personally, as a person who's at the police commission, I don't want to see this work again. We've dealt with it here at this table. I would love to see it go to the city council, for the city council to begin to look at these processes and this policy that we put forward, and give a go ahead to it, or just consider some of the different policies that we put to them. I don't want to do this work again. We already do some stuff like this at the police commission, and it's difficult when we do that. I want to see the city of Eugene take a step forward and being a city that leads the nation in interactions between the police department and the community as a whole, and to see an end to police brutality. And that's a whole other discussion that people get into. I hear it all the time. It doesn't happen here. I hear it all the time. Well, that's taking place in other places across the nation, but it can happen here, and it does happen here. It does. There are people of color that are being killed here all the time. And I want us to be at the forefront of policy that makes it so that the city feels safe, the community members feel safe, and that the police department can do their job and respond to the bad guys when there are bad guys. And there are bad guys out there. I know that. There are bad people out there that are doing bad things, and I know that. And I want the police, officers who were involved to be able to come home at the end of the day. But I also don't think that it's the right for any officer who's out on the street to be judge, jury, and executioner. That's never okay. So this process that I've called Justice League, a process where we've had several organizations of high-ranking, official people from different organizations that I've worked with, that I respect, who sit on this committee, we had an opportunity to do good guiding work. And I feel like we've wasted a huge opportunity. And I'm grateful now we've been able to move a lot of stuff forward. I'm really grateful that we're able to work together, but there was a steep learning curve for a lot of people. And to be able to get them involved now I feel like we've had a tremendous sense of loss, because they're just now getting involved. They're just now coming up to speed with how we work in these bureaucratic systems and how we have these conversations at the table. So that's all I'm going to say.
Thanks, Silver. Does anyone have any? Oh, I see Ibrahim's hand.
Yes, I want to back up a little bit to talk about how we as NAACP we got involved in this. The NAACP has its legal redress committee. since I joined the NAACP in Eugene here, when I moved here, I joined in 2012. I was involved with the Legal Readers Committee. Brian was the attorney, the lawyer who volunteered his time and his staff to help anybody that contacted the NAACP about any kind of discrimination, including police misconduct. So when I received the email from the city to appoint 2 persons to come to this subcommittee, I personally did not want to sit in this committee because Brian and other attorneys, we have few of them, were already doing this job for us. So I thought it was the right platform to bring them to this committee and share their experience. And unfortunately, one of our representatives had to leave. He quit, and I sent an email to see if we could replace that person. And that's how I finally got here myself. We were not involved in the selection. We did not have any kind of conversation with city council about it. Only Jennifer Ye called me a few weeks ago to check on what I think about the process, what's going on. So the NAACP doesn't have any say on how this group is running. What is ironic is we have been doing this for so long. When we had the 2 representatives here, the recommendation was that they report back to legal redress because we have manpower over there. We have people following this work and they can give feedback on what's going on here. And because it takes more time, we work with volunteers. We move it to a Monday, and the idea being that we're gonna educate ourselves. We will call subject matter expert to come answer our question. People like Scott McGee, that's how he got involved, and other people, former city councilors, and we're planning on bringing prosecutors and a lot of other people. I informed Bonnie. Bonnie made suggestion, and we had few people join the group. And the idea is we are here because we pertain to that organization. We will always go back to give report. Always, we will do that. We will give report to NAACP membership because we represent them here. We will take guidances from them. Some people got invited, like Marty, because we're not part of the transponders, but we thought that it was interesting to have someone with that perspective. What we are doing is the NAACP working to get its members, the representative, to come here and be effective. We are not holding a subcommittee meeting. We are talking about recommendation because that's what our community wants. Things that matter to us, we bring it forward, we put it on the table. The committee discuss, and we don't allocate any time to people to speak. We don't appoint or not anybody. So I want that to be clear. We are not involved with the city to run, because I hear that so many times that the NAACP is taking too much space on this meeting. But it's because we have something to say. Brian has been doing this for more than 30 years. He has been representing people from all color in this town. So we have something to say, and we appreciate the opportunity that we have. And we complain about the length of the meeting, because if we have to talk about, if we have to discuss here all the recommendation, and that's why we offer to have subcommittees where people can get ready and bring those kind of things. But we were already doing that. We're not doing that on the city time. We're not doing that on behalf of the city. We're doing that because we were involved in something for years, and we will still be here for years after that. We are the first civil rights organization in this country. It started before me, it will continue after me, and we're not against anybody here, but we will make sure that our voices are here.
Thanks, Ibrahim. I see that it is 8:01. I'm gonna give folks just one more chance to chime in, and then I'm gonna call the meeting. Does anyone have any just burning last words to say?
Yeah, so it feels like Ibrahim is addressing the fact that we had a LULAC member who was sick with COVID for several weeks, and we weren't allowed to have an additional member put into that position. I'm here representing the EPD. I've made that commitment. I've been here for every single meeting. I ask, where are the representatives from the Asian community? How many other people from different organizations have stepped away and not been able to have another voice in this process? I understand what Ibrahim is saying, and I don't think there was any, there can't be any confusion that we were saying that NAACP and the city council were working hand in hand to allow for the NAACP to do this, these backroom things. But there's been a number of people that have not been able to have a proxy put into their seat. And we've lost a tremendous amount of opportunity to hear different voices from the different people that we've reached out to for this specific reason. So that said, I stand by the letter. I wanted it to go on public record. We've had a lot of issue with the process, and there's been some things that have been let go that have continued to happen. Ibrahim addressed the meeting, the subcommittee meeting that he brought up. We were told very early on not to have any meetings with other committee members. And when emails were taking place, we were told to not have those emails continue, that it was against Oregon Public Record law. So those issues are addressed in the letter. I let them stand.
May I add something?
Thank you.
I'm done.
Only if it takes 1 minute. I'm closing this meeting out at 8:05.
30 seconds. So I know the Oregon Public Record law, and I think if I was emailing people in this group or for that to have a specific discussion about this thing, that may, if we had reached the quorum, there's an issue with the public record law. But we pertain to an organization. Daniel and Eve here are part of the Human Rights Commission. During our meeting, they asked them for a report. They asked me to speak on what's going on here. I said, I will not speak because I do not represent the Human Rights Commission here. But we as an organization, we have the right to have meetings about our participation to the ad hoc committee. I was not invited as Ibrahim. Brian was not invited as Brian. They invited the NAACP. So we have to report back, and we have to come here prepared with what matters to us. So that doesn't violate the public record law. So I appreciate your letter. You raised a lot of issues on that letter. I think later on, staff will have the opportunity to have a conversation with you or the group that signed the letter and address what is in that letter. But I felt like, yes, I was the one who came in recently, and that's why I wanted to give the context.
If you guys were meeting and you guys were setting up what policies you were going to put forward, then that puts us all at a tremendous disadvantage. If you guys had already in mind.
Competition though, man.
No, it's not a competition, but it's setting up for everybody else on the ad hoc committee who's doing it at the meeting to not be able to be present with the policies that you guys are already working on. And it just puts us at a tremendous disadvantage because we didn't have that opportunity to do that on our own or to do that in our own subcommittees.
Of course you did.
Advised to do that.
Of course you had
Hey,
that opportunity.
guys.
Of course you had that opportunity. You just didn't
Brian.
take
Everyone, we're quite a bit
Brian.
over time, and I think one of the things that might help in terms of clarifying the correspondence that's taken place, I'm happy to recirculate the emails that were sent out at the beginning of this process when we outlined what was and was not permissible. I'm not sure that this discussion has the opportunity to be very productive without those pieces of correspondence in front of us. I'm also happy to share the procedure for appointing alternates. Again, I will do that after this meeting so that we all have absolute clarity on precisely what it is that we're discussing. And we are significantly over time, so I will hand back to Mo.
We're gonna close out the meeting. If folks feel like having a conversation at the next meeting about this, rather than talking about motions, reach out to staff. Have a really good night.
Thank you, Mo, for all your efforts, and we'll miss you when you're gone.
Good night. Buenas noches.